All right, well, let's dive in. So thanks everyone for joining. The topic today for today's webinar is how to price your home and sell yourself for maximum value. So we're going to go over a few tools that you can use to establish the list price on your home and demonstrate the tools that we have available on Bōde that are at your disposal to help with this process. So by way of a quick introduction for those on the call that don't know me, I'm Jeff. I'm a founder with the company and also the vice president of sales for Bōde. I come from a bit of a real estate background, so I sold real estate for quite some time, about 12 years. Started my own brokerage in 2010 and operated that for about 10 years, built it up to about 40 agents, and kind of determined that I needed a new challenge and wanted to be part of a company that really moved the industry forward. You know, we hear from a lot of people that this industry hasn't evolved for a long time, and it's not that the industry hasn't evolved. I think that the industry's actually evolved a lot in many ways over the last kind of 20, 25 years, but it's really evolved in a way that's benefited agents and less evolved in a way that's benefited consumers. So what we try to do every day at Bōde is make consumer-centric decisions and really give sellers and buyers of real estate the tools and data they need to transact on their own if they choose to. Okay, just to start, so why is it important and why do you need an accurate list price? So one kind of fact that I think a lot of people are surprised to learn is that 50% of homes that go to market on realtor.ca actually fail to sell. So I think most people have this assumption that when you go to market, you're on the market for whatever the average days on market is, call it 50, 60 days, and then you sell. And what that fails to recognize is that half the homes that go to market actually fail to sell. So that's one reason why setting an accurate list price is so important. The next topic we want to cover is just how overpricing leads to underselling. And I'll preface this by just saying that there's an inherent bias towards overpricing your home. And if you think about why that is, it's really quite obvious. And the bias is that at some point in time you purchased the home that you're ultimately selling, which means that at that time you valued the home more than anyone else on the market because you ultimately purchased it. So when it comes to selling, it's a natural bias that sellers have to think that their home is valued higher than what the market believes. So just looking at this chart, we can see that if we just use numbers here and said the market value of the home was 500,000, what happens is that sellers often will start out with a bit of an optimistic list price. So we could say that this is 560. A seller will say, well, I don't want to leave money on the table. I'm gonna price my home at 560. So you might have some showings, you might have some feedback, but you're not getting any offers. So what happens after a few weeks? You reduce the price to 540. You're still not getting offers. Maybe every time you reduce, you get a bit more, a flurry of activity, but you're still not getting offers. So you drop to 520. And meanwhile, while you're overpriced on the market, what you're doing is actually assisting other listings to sell because they're comparing everything that's on the market. And when they see this home at 560, they're actually buying the home that proves to be better value. So eventually you get down to this mark where you're actually at market value now. So let's say in this example that it's a $500,000 home, you actually price at market value. The problem is, as buyers see homes that sit on the market longer and longer and they start to get somewhat stale, they begin to lose a little bit of interest, but also worry about the fact that it's been on the market that long and that other buyers haven't purchased. So these successive price reductions reduce buyer confidence in the product that they're buying, and ultimately after you've been on the market for a very long time, you may actually sell for lower than market value. And, if had this home, gone to market at 520 in this example, maybe it would have sold more quickly at the market value. And, pricing a home is not pure science. It's not there's a lot of methodologies that we'll go through to demonstrate how you can actually arrive at an accurate list price. So another thing that we track very closely at Bōde is the average sold to list price ratio. And what I think most people believe is that this fluctuates quite a bit. In a hot market, I think a lot of people would expect that this number would be very close to 100%. And in a cold market, this number might be more like 85 to 90% sold price to list price ratio. And that's not what we see. When we analyze the data, what we actually see across even, going back 10, 15 years, the average sold to list price ratio is about 97%, and it fluctuates very, very little. Obviously you see these one-off examples of homes that sell for 75 or 80% of the list price, or maybe they sell for 110% of the list price. But those are rare instances, and the average is remarkably consistent at 97%. So what that tells us is that buyers are very hesitant to make lowball offers, and part of this is cultural. We have as Canadians, we're very polite, and we don't necessarily feel comfortable writing very low offers. And that's the reason that this average sold to list price ratio is so consistent. We had an example just a few weeks ago. We had a seller in the southeast of Calgary in Riverbend, and he went to market at a somewhat optimistic price. He bought at a peak in the market and was trying to recoup as much as he could out of the property. I think he went to market at about 550, and the value was really closer to 510, maybe 500. And he sat on market and reduced again, just like the example we went through, kind of to 540 to 520, and eventually sold for, I think, 505. And he was in discussions after the sale was completed. We were chatting with him to get feedback and learn about his experience, and he just said, well, I don't understand why someone didn't just offer me 505 at the outset if that's what it was worth. And what we see time and time again is just that the market is very sensitive to pricing, and if you are off 5 to 10%, you're simply not going to get those offers. As a general rule, you would say that if you're on the market and you're getting no showings, you're probably off by 10% or more. And if you're getting showings but no offers, you might be off by, or priced high by, say, 5%. So major factors to consider when pricing your home. What you really want to determine is, what is your house worth today? And the answer to that is quite simply whatever a buyer is willing to pay for it. And I would add to that, whatever a qualified and serious buyer is willing to pay for it. So how do buyers determine what they're willing to pay? They really look at two different things. And the one that they'll probably factor their decision on most is the other homes that have recently sold. So they'll use that data point to determine what they're willing to pay for the subject property. But then, of course, as part of their process, they will also compare your subject home to everything else that's available to them. And I was chatting with one of my colleagues here who just bought a home that he was renting. So they've been renting this property for 6 months. The opportunity came up to buy it, and they loved the home. They knew they wanted to purchase it. But what was really interesting was that even before they made that purchase decision, they still went around to see every other home that was kind of in the area and at the same price point. So what they were doing was this exact point here, which is comparing their home to everything else that was available on the market, even though they were absolutely determined to buy that. They wanted to make sure that it made sense. And when I worked with buyers for many years, I saw that that was the case. You know, a buyer would find their call it their dream home, the exact home they wanted, but that didn't necessarily end their search. They still wanted to go out and compare that subject property to other homes to make sure that it was in fact the right decision. So buying a home is really a massive comparison shopping exercise. The next will seem quite obvious to many on the call, but the major factors that determine your home's value, the number one, and I know this is cliche, but location, right? Location of your home is the number one factor that will determine your home's value. It's why, you know, the average apartment in Calgary might be 380,000, and in New York it might be 1.2 million, right? It's the same square footage. It's a very similar product, but location definitely dictates and is the number one factor. The next factor that you want to look at is type and style. So by type, what we refer to here is things like apartment versus townhouse versus semi-detached property versus detached property. So that's what we refer to with type. And then style would be the style of property. So is it a single level apartment versus a multi-level apartment? Is it a 2-story or a 3-story home? That's what we mean when we refer to style. And then of course the third factor is size. And here we're just referring to livable square footage. And of course, lot size as well, if that's applicable to the property type. So those three things really account for the majority of value in any given home. The next two items, condition and amenities, we would say that those things really contribute far less to the value of home, but do have a big impact on saleability. So the examples that I typically use here, well, condition is quite obvious. You know, how much work does the home need? Has it been maintained? Has it been upkept? You know, that will really sway a buyer towards one home versus another one when they work in. This is kind of, if you think about the buyer's viewing experience, this is what they view when they come through on their first showing. And then amenities, you know, I think the mistake that a lot of sellers make is that they price with the idea that amenities are really impacting the value of their home, when really it's simply swaying buyers to purchase your home versus something else. So the example here would be if you have, you know, heated floors in the master ensuite. That's a really nice feature, but it's not necessarily going to move the needle on property value, at least not in a significant way. So the different opinions of value, again, we went over the, kind of that bias that sellers have to believe that the value of their home is higher than market value. Buyers, of course, want to pay as little as possible to get the property that they want. And the best approximation of market value would be what an appraiser completes. So an appraiser is a trained individual who is licensed to conduct property appraisals. And what's different between appraisals and comparative market analysis, which is what we'll talk about in a moment, is that a comparative market analysis will give you a range of values for market value, whereas an appraiser will actually give you a single value. So again, using our example, they might say this home is worth $485,000, whereas a comparative market analysis will provide a range. You know, this home is worth between $460,000 and $500,000. So pricing methodologies. What I want to talk about today is really 3 different kinds of data. These are not all the data that are available to you, but there's 3 that I think make a lot of sense and should be reviewed when considering your list price. You know, the fourth one that we get that comes up often when we open up for questions is tax assessed value. Tax assessed value is one thing that you might use to triangulate a home's value, but I wouldn't use it in, you know, just on its own. You really want to use all of the data that you have at your disposal and to triangulate a home's value. So the first one is the HPI index. And then the other two are recently sold listings and then active listings. So again, you want to look at what other options buyers have available to them on the market. So I'll jump into the first one. The Canadian Real Estate Association publishes something called the Home Price Index, and they've been doing it for now 16 years. So it started in 2005 and incorporates over 15 years of data. And what they do is they publish the Home Price Index for 65 local markets across Canada. So basically what they did is they said, okay, on, I think it was January 1st, 2005, every one of these markets, of these 65 local markets, was assigned an index of 100. And what they've done is tracked the typical home value for each of those markets. So, in Calgary, where we are today, we could see that there was a big peak around 2006, 2007, a huge drop off with the financial crisis in 2008. And then, again, a peak in 2014, and that really fell off in 15, 16. And again, we're seeing the HPI increase again as the housing market has heated up in the midst of the pandemic. So this is just an example of how you might apply the home price index. This is a home that I owned in Calgary. I bought it in May 2011. At the time, the home price index for Calgary, and specifically for bungalows. So when you look at the spreadsheet, this information you can find freely online. Just Google Korea HPI index. What they'll allow you to do is to download the spreadsheet. There's both seasonally adjusted and seasonally unadjusted numbers. They don't vary that much, so feel free to download either one. So here, to apply this, the home price index in May 2011 for Calgary for bungalows was about 166. I sold this home just about a year ago, a little over, maybe a year and a half ago. And the home price index at that time was about 188. So the HPI had increased by about 22%. And as a reasonable approximation, if you increase 610,000 by 22%, I think it works out to about 715. I ultimately sold this development property for, I think, about 715. So it wasn't a perfect approximation, but this is just one other data set that you might use. So we'll do a case study towards the end of this webinar where we'll actually look at a home and what it had sold for. And again, you could simply apply this home price index and get a reasonable approximation of value in today's market. If any of this is confusing, we are offering at the end of the webinar, anyone who's interested will be able to book some time, and we can go over your actual subject property and how the HPI actually applies to it. The next one that we want to talk about is the CMA, so the comparative market analysis. This is the thing that you'll see on a lot of bus benches if you live in a city with transit. Call for your free CMA. This is what agents always, use as a tool to get a listing presentation. So it's a method of property valuation used to estimate the value of residential properties. And as I mentioned before, what it does is it provides a range of value. So it doesn't actually give you a single value. It will usually be, a range of 2 to 5%. So, they'll say again, this property is valued between 460 and 590,000. And the way a CMA works is it examines the price at which similar properties in the same area have recently sold. So it's really just a comparison between properties that have recently sold and usually in a similar proximity to the subject property. And then adjustments are made. So, if a home has a finished basement and the subject property doesn't, you would make an adjustment for that. Or maybe the home has the subject property has a double garage and you're comparing it to one that has a triple garage, you would make an adjustment for that. So next, I want to show everyone on the call just how to access the tools that we have available to you on Bōde. So we really have three. I'm going to show you two of them today. So market data and sold data. And this is free on our website. Anyone has access to this, and you just require an account to log in. We can't make this completely public facing due to regulations, but as long as you are in a logged in state on our platform, this information is freely available. So the first one you can see here is the three tools: market data, sold data, and comparable. So I'm just going to jump out of this presentation and into the actual website, which is here. So we're going to use an example of a subject property for someone that's on the call today. So we asked, I think, a number of the registrants to provide an address, and we received some back, and we're going to use, I believe it's 149 Cove Meadow Bay Northeast. So this is a Calgary detached home, and we'll just go through kind of a real life example of how you might find this data. So first thing you do is head up to sold data. You'll be in a logged in state here to market data. We are operating in Alberta and BC, so the first step will be selecting your province, the city, and then the date range. So in Alberta, we have data going back about 11 years, but for relevance, we'll just stick to 1 year for now. Now, all of these next fields are optional. So you can, in this case, we know that the subject property is in Coventry Hills, not Country Hills. Coventry Hills, and it's a detached property. So we can simply hit apply filters, and you can see that this graph is generating, and you can see the average sold price for 1 year. You can change the time range if you want to look back just 6 months. Again, you can generate the graph, and you can look at all different types of information here. So let's look back. Keep in mind that this is only showing data for the specific community, which is really important because what we've seen is that, especially given the pandemic and everything that's happened in the last 2 years, certain communities are performing much better than others. And what the trend that we're kind of following is what we refer to as the urban exodus. So the willingness of buyers to sacrifice their location a little bit for bigger homes. And that's why in Calgary, you know, the Beltline and the downtown has not performed as well as areas like Airdrie and High River and Cochrane, because for the same dollar, call it 400,000, that might get you a two bathroom apartment downtown. You know, if you're willing to commute, and if you're not commuting to work, you're definitely willing to commute more. You know, you can get a detached home with a double attached garage and a large yard. So we've been following that trend very closely. So that's market data. The next tool is sold data. So there's two ways to use this tool. The first is you can search by individual address. So again, if we want to look at that subject property of the home that I sold here, you simply type in the address, and now we can see that there's two records. So it sold once in 2020 for 740,000. And if you click here, it'll toggle you over to the previous sale, which again is within that last 10 years, when it sold in March 2011 for 610,000. The other way that you can access the sold data is by actually typing in the province, which is not Calgary, is Alberta, city, and at a community level. So here we'll look at that same community of Altadore. We'll go back just 3 months, hit apply, and now the map will populate all properties that have sold in the last 3 months, or whatever time frame you choose. So you can see again, here we can see 1910 50th Avenue. You can see the list price, the sold price, and the sold to list price ratio. So before I navigate away back to the presentation and away from our platform, I'm just gonna show everyone how easy it is to start listing. So This is just a screen showing how simple it is to list your home. So you simply click sell your home, and enter your address. As soon as you've done that, what the system does is takes you into this flow. My screen will look a little bit different than yours, as we will ask you to map the property with this blue dot. And then we'll ask you a number of questions. So if you want your phone number provided on your listing page, and then a bunch of other information, if your home is the property type of the subject property, the beds, the baths, the year built, the asking price. We give sellers full control over whether or not they choose to offer a commission. So here you can see that the seller has selected, yes, I want to offer a commission. We indicate what a typical commission is, which is 3.5% on the first 100,000 and 1.5% on the balance. You may offer a flat rate or a custom rate. So here we can see that the custom rate offered is 3% on the first 100,000 and 1% on the balance. So this is just showing you exactly how easy it is to list. You'll get to a section at the bottom called rooms and photos and video. And that's from there you can schedule professional photos and professional measurements, which are requirements to post to realtor.ca. We pay for those on behalf of our sellers, and all we ask for is just a 90-day listing agreement, and we cover all costs. So coming back to the presentation, I'd mentioned we were just going to go through a quick case study. So what I want to do is just show everyone what data we provide. So as soon as you click list your property and provide us with your address, our team gets to work and starts to provide you with information that's going to be helpful as you move through the process. So this is the subject property for the registrant that's on the call today. 149, I believe, Cove Meadow Bay. So very saleable property, in my opinion. It's this is the type of product that has been selling very well. It's a little bit outside the core. It's detached. It has parking. It has a large yard. So the first thing that we provide to every seller that starts listing with us, if there has been MLS history, so if the home has sold on realtor.ca in the past, we will provide the most recent MLS sheet. And what this does is really allow our sellers to, double check their understanding of their home. So if you're not totally convinced that your roof type is asphalt shingles, you can see here that it is in fact asphalt shingles. We can see that this home sold in about 11 years ago, August 11th, 2010. At that time, the list price was $402,000 and it sold for $386,000. So this is where you might choose to look at that CREA HPI index and see, what was the HPI in August of 2010, and you'll be able to determine that exact number for two-story detached homes. And you can apply that, whatever factor that might be, call it 1.3x to 386, and again, that will give you a reasonable approximation of home value today. Of course, it doesn't account for a lot of renovations or upgrades that you may have done in the last 10 years. But this information is really handy. You can see the history, so we can see that it sold a few times on market. It did go to market a few times in 2010 where it didn't sell. So this is where we're starting to see that 50% of homes that go to market ultimately don't sell, and that's what happened here. We can see that it went to market with 5 Star Realty in January, but expired, and then it went to market in March of 2010 with Remax, and again, it was terminated at that time. You can see the map of the property, and we also include the photos, so you can look back at what the home looked like when you ultimately purchased it. The next thing that we do is show everyone or send an email to all sellers that have started listings with an objective view of what's happening in the market. So what we'll typically do is we'll draw a radius around the subject property of about 1 kilometer. If it's dense If it's a dense neighborhood, we'll look a little bit smaller, maybe 500 meters. And we'll just send all of the most recent sold comparables. So this is a really objective view of all the homes that have sold near 149 Cove Meadow Bay in the last year. And this is really where you get to start on the comparative market analysis. So you can see these are organized from the highest price to the lowest price. As you scroll through these listings on the right, you can see here that they highlight, so you can see the location. We can see that there is only one active listing. I think the criteria that we used here, which we always share with our sellers, was detached homes built between, I believe, 2002 and 2008, which is kind of a range around the subject property year built. And all of them had a double attached garage. So we can see that there's one active listing at 570, but most of the sales have been lower. You know, the highest price sale in the last year has been at 526,000. There's another at 525, and at the low end, the least expensive home to have sold in the area in the last year was 358. So this is where you start to see, okay, well, where do I fit? You know, you can click on a home and you can get all the details. You can see the photos and start to determine, okay, you know, this home photographs nicely. It looks like it probably has had some upgrades, really nice yard, and you can start comparing how your subject property might value in comparison to this one that sold for 425, which was actually 10,000 above the list price. So I want to leave just a little bit of time for questions. Just to summarize real quickly, overpricing is the main reason that homes fail to sell, and we know that half the time they don't sell. Your home is really worth what a buyer is willing to pay for it. Ultimately, a buyer is going to look at recently sold properties and then also what else they could buy with the same amount of money that's available on the market today. And there's three main data sources for triangulating your home value: HPI index, the active competition, and recently sold listings. So we provide you with all the information that you need to set the perfect list price. As I promised, at the end of this webinar, we'll send out a link where you have access to my calendar to book, I believe it's a 15 or 30-minute call to go over any of the data that you'd like. We can look at sold comparables for your home and also the active competition, and we can even apply the home price index to your home to kind of triangulate value. The other thing that we'll be sending out is an ebook with a lot of what we covered today, but in more detail. We call it the Ultimate Guide to Pricing Your Home, and everyone on the call today will receive that at some point in the next few hours after the call. Yeah, Shane, are you there? Anything popped up in the chat or any questions that we should address before kind of wrapping up?
Yes, Jeff, we did actually get two questions, so I'll get you those now. First one up here. Question: which season is the best time of year to sell a home?
Okay, yeah, this one comes up quite often. It's everyone, I would say, kind of has a different opinion on this matter. So in Alberta, we see the highest number of closings that we have is always May of every year. So what that means is that most purchases, because the typical time from firm sale, so unconditional deal, to closing is about 45 days. What that tells us is that most homes are actually being shopped for in March and April, which leads to a May closing. So you might think, okay, perfect, you know, that's the best time to go to market. There's differing opinions on that because you have far more competition, because a lot of sellers are thinking that way. So a lot of we see a surge in sales, but we also see a surge in new listings. So, you know, the contrarian view to this is that you should actually list in December when there's very few options for buyers to choose from. There's still homes selling at a far far fewer rate than in May, but you do have a lot less competition. So I would say it depends on a lot of factors. The one I would consider a lot right now is that we know that outdoor space has become very important to people amidst the pandemic. So if your home doesn't look or show that well, and maybe your yard is a really big selling feature, I would be inclined to list when your yard looks great. On the other side of that coin is if you live on the 35th floor of an apartment building, the weather probably matters a little bit less. So maybe you would be inclined to go to market, when there is less competition on the market and buyers simply have less active inventory to choose from. Was there a second question, Shane?
Okay, here we go. How much time does it take to get the photos and measurements back and get my home listed on Bōde?
Yeah, good question. So typically the listing process, so that process of clicking the sell your home button and filling in all the information, most sellers get through that process in about 10 to 15 minutes. It's we think very intuitive. There is a turnaround time to get the professional photos and measurements scheduled. So it does vary by season. Again, March and April takes a little bit longer, but we usually say 2 business days. So if you start listing your home on, what day are we today? Wednesday, we could expect that the photos and measurements would probably be completed by Friday, and we would have you live either Friday or Saturday. So I would say account for about 3 business days before you want to go to market to start that process. Of course, if you want to start that process early, you can simply save your draft at any time and go to market whenever you choose. So a lot of our sellers will start filling out that work, and they have no intention of going to market until for a month or 2, which is totally fine. All of that information is saved. The one thing that we are encouraging a lot of sellers that have started listing but not gone to market is to look at getting photos completed now. We never know when our winter's gonna come. So if you've got your flowers and your grass is green right now, schedule those photos, get them in your account, and that way, if you do decide to go to market in October, November, you've got really amazing photos to do it with. We do see that some sellers will upload their own photos. Obviously iPhone technology is great. They take excellent quality photos, but I would highly encourage all of our sellers to use professional photographers. They have higher quality equipment. They have the right lenses, and they are able to capture photos that are reflected really well on realtor.ca and on Bōde. So, sometimes when I see sellers will upload their own photos, they'll often jump between like a portrait mode and a landscape mode, and it makes it really hard to get a good visualization of a property. Whereas with professionals, they'll take 95% in landscape mode. So it's just a better viewing experience, and definitely I would say the most important aspect of marketing your property is the quality of the photos. So sorry, a bit of a tangent there, but yeah, if there aren't any other questions, Shane, let me know, but we'll probably wrap it up there. And as I mentioned, invite everyone to a call if they'd like with me afterwards, and send out this free ebook.
Yeah, that's it for questions so far.
Perfect. Okay, Shane. Well, thanks for moderating, and thanks everyone else for being on, and hope to see you on a one-to-one call later this week or next week.